Hello and welcome to a new video. Today I'm going to be talking about the Starkiller base from The Force Awakens and the general problems I have with it and its design. And like the previous video, it will be accompanied by some gameplay footage, so we'll get right to that. Now, plenty has already been said about the absurdity that it was able to be constructed without interference or knowledge. The Republic apparently did not know, or even worse, care about the fact that for all intents and purposes, a third Death Star was being made. You think that would be top priority, but I suppose not. It is not the main criticism I have, but it will come into play later. Instead, my main criticism is the fact that it is a planet as opposed to a spaceship, or space station more accurately. Now, the Death Stars must have been a ridiculously cost and resource intensive set of projects. They're making these massive structures completely out of metal, all self-containing. So one could, at risk of rating the script for J.J. Abrams, say that the reason they chose to use a planet rather than build an entire Death Star is because it would cost a lot less. You would be gaining resources as you dig out the planet, and you would already have all the mass and gravity you would need. You wouldn't have to install any artificial gravity stuff in the planet. This is ignoring the fact that the Starkiller base isn't even larger than our own moon, which has significantly less gravity than Earth. Gravity just works strangely in the Star Wars universe. But the point is, despite the fact that it is larger than the Death Stars, it seems to be a lot more cost efficient. However, there is a downside, and that's the fact that when digging out a planet, you're essentially subjected to using that planet and all the unknowns and problems that come with it. You don't have full control like you would when building a space station from scratch. The biggest problem for the Starkiller base is, where does it get its heat from? The Death Star is a self-contained system. It's a ball of metal. If you go on the surface, for whatever reason, you're just going to find metal keeping everything inside safe. It doesn't need an atmosphere. It doesn't need an external fuel source, since it's able to fire its planet-destroying beam from some internal source of power. But the Starkiller is a planet. It has its own ecosystem. It has an atmosphere. It is able to sustain life, and the First Order seem to like that as they host their propaganda speeches on the surface of the planet. They take off from the Starkiller base from the surface of the planet. So what happens when the Starkiller base drains a nearby star for fuel source to fire its laser, destroys several other planets, and then needs to move somewhere else? It's going to be drifting through space for a while without any light, without any heat. It's already cold enough to have snow on its surface. Making it any colder will probably ruin the chances of it actually being hospitable on the surface. I'm sorry, Hux, but you'll have to host your speeches inside. It does have its own shield on the planet rather than an external one like the Death Star 2. which is an advancement in engineering. But I'm pretty sure the shields aren't meant to sustain the whole of the ecosystem and atmosphere. They're just to prevent enemy ships from coming inside. Another problem is movement. The Death Star could be built anywhere, it's its own thing, but since the Starkiller base already has life and an atmosphere on it, it would have already been orbiting a star when they started construction. So now they'll need to figure out how to move a planet outside, away from its star's gravitational pull. And you could argue, yes, they have this magic technology that's able to do this stuff. It's a sci-fi fantasy setting after all. But it would have been nice if there was some physical object on the planet that would indicate that's how it moves. I would imagine that moving a planet from one place to another is a huge endeavor, but they would also have to move it faster than the speed of light, otherwise it would take centuries for them to get it from one star to another, and that wouldn't exactly make for a very good super weapon if all you had to do was wait for them to leave the nearby star and then freeze to death. It really comes into question then why they would need to drain stars for the energy for their laser, when it seems like just moving the thing is going to be the most energy intensive part about it. Especially since, again, the Death Star didn't need to drain any stars. It had its laser producing source inside of itself. So they couldn't just build 4 more of those inside the Starkiller base and use that. Did they need it to be turbo planet destroying? What about the Death Star's beam was inadequate? And now to address the more often utilized criticism for The Last Jedi, but one I still haven't heard anyone bring up, though I admit I have not looked quite as well as I could have. From what we've seen, this Starkiller base was sitting near its own sun and fired its laser at the Republic solar system. It was within firing distance of this base. Now, it could be upgraded and have a far longer distance than the Death Star, which would make sense. But it would still have to be within some reasonable range of the planet, unless there's some scene in the movies or extended universe that explains it can fire its laser all the way across the galaxy without issue. So how was this not detected? How was a mass terraforming endeavor, the likes of which was done on the Starkiller base, not noticed by the Republic? It should be a system, a solar system within the neighborhood, the galactic neighborhood of the Republic, and yet it went completely under their noses. NASA, at a significant handicap compared to what the Star Wars characters have in terms of technology, are able to keep better tabs on the planets and stars of the galaxy than this galactic advanced political force. This massive terraforming endeavor should have been noticed by somebody, especially when it's so bloody close to their system. because even though they would possibly get all the material they needed in order to make the cannon and stuff from the planet itself, they would still need to displace a bunch of material, mountains worth of rocks that likely aren't used for building planet-destroying cannons would have to be moved away from the planet. And also comes into question, was this thing ever fired before Episode 7? Rogue One showed the Death Star having a test fire on a planet. It didn't completely destroy it, but did do a significant amount of damage. Wouldn't they need to make sure that this planet works completely before firing it at their political enemies? And in which case, why would no one be aware of it? Remember, this is when the Republic took back control of the galaxy, and they are aware that it is possible to make space stations that destroy planets. If there's one thing that they should be concerned about and monitoring, is whether or not planets suddenly mysteriously disappear. And given that all the victims of the Death Stars, well, the first one, were habitable worlds, those would be the planets they would keep most track of, including the very planet that is the Starkiller base. It really is an enigma that none of this leaked to the Republic. There's no knowledge, it seems, that this thing is being built by this up-and-coming Empire-esque enemy faction. I think they really should have thought this through better, rather than trying to remake A New Hope, but crappier. They really should have tried to do something new. Because right now the Starkiller base really is just like the Death Star, but it's bigger and betterer and more threateninger. It's basically what Red Letter Media had to say about the stadium in Episode 2 in comparison to the stadium from Gladiator, where he thought that George Lucas's thoughts was, well, you know, mine will be bigger and cooler and have all this other stuff. Well, that seems like what the mindset when designing the Starkiller base was. And worse yet, it doesn't even seem to phase the First Order. The Last Jedi takes place minutes, hours, seconds actually, the race scenes, after Episode 7, and seems like the First Order are just able to shrug it off. The Empire was able to bounce back a bit from the destruction of the Death Star, sure, but Episode 5 took place quite a while after Episode 4. We don't really know what happened between those episodes and how they were able to deal with the loss of such a costly base or mechanism. And they were the dominant force in the galaxy. The First Order would have to still be hidden as to not get absolutely railed by the Republic or the Resistance or whatever, and every other faction in the galaxy for that matter, because I'm pretty sure even independent factions from the Republic don't want another empire either. So yeah, these new Star Wars movies are kinda crap, but what else is new? I hope you enjoyed the video, that I gave you something to think about and otherwise entertained you. Take care.